No live timing. No official video feed. Just 12 images per team and silence from the FIA. Day 1 of preseason testing wasn't just private, it was engineered to be invisible. Red Bull ran fast with a rookie. Mercedes ran longer than anyone else. And 4 major teams, Ferrari, McLaren, Aston Martin, Williams, didn't show up at all. F1 called it a shakedown. But that's not the whole truth. Because what happened on January 26 and what didn't is already shaping the political and technical balance of 2026. January 26, 2026. The official start of a new Formula One era. New rules. New cars. New power units. But if you were expecting a bold new beginning, what you got was silence. Calculated. Controlled. Almost theatrical in its restraint. Only 7 teams ran. There was no live timing. No onboard footage. No broadcast, not even a basic lap counter. Team gave a reason: technical prep, logistics, timing. But the absence of 4 cars on the opening day of a 5-day test speaks louder than any press release. Meanwhile, the teams that did run had their own issues. Alpine's car shut down with a suspected electrical fault. Audi's test ended after 27 laps with a potential turbo failure. Red flags came early. The track was cold, the setups weren't stable, and the regulations, the most complex in modern F1, hadn't been truly stress tested until now. Behind the curtain, it was chaos masked by PR silence. And that silence wasn't just about privacy. It was about control. Because when no one can see what's happening, no one can question it. No one can compare. No one can accuse. Not yet. And that's exactly how Formula One wanted it. It wasn't even supposed to be impressive. Just a system check, that's what these shakedowns are for. Cold tires, high fuel, conservative engine maps. But one lap, from one car, shifted the narrative before it even started. Isack Hadjar, a Red Bull Jr., clocked a 1 minute and 18.835 seconds. Unverified. Unofficial. But timed by multiple sources watching from turn 10. That single number, in isolation, means very little. But in context? It changed everything. Because Red Bull didn't need to be fast. They just needed to look ready. And that's exactly what they did. The car was balanced. Stable on entry. No visible instability on throttle. No corrections, no panic, no limitation. The message wasn't speed. It was confidence. In a test environment where most teams were hiding behind garage doors, Red Bull chose visibility. Not through interviews or PR, but through the most effective method in racing. Letting the car speak for itself. Mercedes saw that lap, everyone did. They had Antonelli running that same morning, logging 56 laps without incident. But the pace wasn't there. And more importantly, the intent wasn't. It felt like they were gathering data, not making a statement. And that's why the Hadjar lap matters. Because on a day built around secrecy, Red Bull broke the silence without breaking any rules. No declarations. No drama. Just a subtle flex that forced the rest of the grid to pay attention. The lap was unofficial. But the consequences? Those might be very real. In any other season, 4 teams skipping the first day of testing might pass quietly. But in 2026, it's different. Because this isn't just a new season, it's a fundamental reset. New chassis profiles. New power unit architecture. And energy recovery systems that have to do twice the work, under stricter limitations. Which is why their absence raised real questions. Ferrari, after weeks of bold language, calling their SF26 extreme and uncompromising, didn't run. The car was present in Barcelona. It was ready in the garage. But it never touched the track. There was no explanation beyond a vague reference to preparations continuing. But for a team that's promised to challenge Red Bull from round 1, this was not the opening statement they wanted. McLaren's silence was even sharper. They ended 2025 as genuine front-runners. Norris was consistent, the car was reliable, and development was on schedule. Which makes their no-show on day one harder to read. Was it strategic, hiding something stronger than expected? Or was it uncertainty masked as confidence? Aston Martin and Williams followed a similar pattern. The cars were there. The staff was on site. But no one turned a lap. Some murmurs pointed to last-minute calibration issues, others to thermal problems related to the new hybrid layout. But none of those theories were confirmed. Which leaves only speculation and pressure. Because when Red Bull shows up and sets the tone, every other team that stayed silent starts off behind. Not just in data, but in perception. And in Formula One, perception becomes momentum fast. These weren't strategic delays. They were missed opportunities. And in a 5-day testing window, one day isn't just 20%. It could be the difference between starting prepared and starting reactive. What's most unsettling about day one isn't who ran or who didn't. It's who should have spoken and didn't. The FIA introduced this entire generation of power units. They pushed for the hybrid restructuring. They rebalanced energy systems to reduce fuel use, limit top speed, and reward electrical deployment. And then, on the first day of testing, they went silent. There was no public technical report. No guidance on energy maps, deployment tolerances, or battery cooling loopholes. No clarification of what teams could or couldn't do in this 5-day window. Just silence. And in a sport built on regulation, that silence isn't passive, it's dangerous. Because when the FIA steps back, the fastest teams step forward. Not just on track, but into the gray zones. Red Bull didn't break rules on day one, but they didn't wait to have them explained either. They interpreted the system early. They ran full energy cycles. And the FIA? They watched from the background, offering no corrections. It's not that anyone's cheating. It's that the parameters for what's allowed haven't been enforced. Which means the first team to define those limits in practice, not in theory, gains real-world advantage. We've seen this before. Ferrari's fuel flow saga in 2019. Mercedes' DAS in 2020. Both operated in silence until the results forced regulation. By then, the advantage had already paid off. That's where we are again. Only this time, it's day one. And the teams who understand that silence equals permission are already building the future around it. No one gets points for day one. There are no trophies for a shakedown. But that doesn't mean it's meaningless. Because in a sport built on preparation, whoever looks stable early often stays ahead for longer than anyone expects. Mercedes technically did the most. 56 laps with Kimi Antonelli. Clean, conservative, uninterrupted. But they weren't trying to push. There were no sector peaks, no visible effort to simulate qualifying pace. It was methodical, but cautious. And in a year like this, caution doesn't look like control. It looks like fear of exposure. Red Bull, on the other hand, ran less and said more. Just 36 laps. But every corner Hadjar told a story. They weren't checking boxes, they were sending signals. The RB20 wasn't hiding. It wasn't flawless, but it wasn't scared. Audi's session was short. 27 laps and then done. Some whispered turbo instability. Others said it was always meant to be a limited run. But either way, it didn't inspire confidence. And when you're new even with resources, that early perception is hard to shake. Haas quietly did what Haas always does. Run laps. Avoid headlines. 42 in total. It was clean. Functional. Unremarkable. Which might be enough for them. But in a season where boldness will be required early, that invisibility could cost them. Alpine had a shutdown. A suspected ERS fault stopped their car in the middle of the circuit. That's not just a red flag. That's a systems-level concern. Because these new hybrids aren't just engines, they're power networks. And if your deployment breaks down on day one, you're not collecting data, you're falling behind. So who won? Not officially. But in terms of momentum, Red Bull left the day owning the narrative. And everyone else, even those who ran, looked either quiet, reactive, or incomplete. Day one of preseason testing didn't explode. There were no crashes. No viral onboard clips. No late-breaking controversies. But maybe that's exactly why it matters more than usual. Because in a sport where every tenth of a second is hunted, where every part is tracked, logged, optimized, this was a day built around absence. Absence of data. Absence of visibility. Absence of explanation. And that absence wasn't shared equally. Red Bull filled the void with intent. Mercedes filled it with restraint. Ferrari, McLaren, Aston Martin, and Williams didn't fill it at all. And when you leave a vacuum in Formula One, someone else defines it for you. What F1 tried to hide wasn't scandal. It was fragility. A technical reset that may not be under control. A governing body that didn't set the tone. And a competitive landscape that, in just one day, already looks imbalanced. Because when some teams show up prepared, and others don't show up at all, it doesn't take long for that gap to become permanent. This wasn't just a quiet start. It might have been the real beginning of a season where the fastest aren't just faster. They're louder, bolder, and already reshaping what the rules were supposed to equalize. And if that's what testing looked like with everything hidden, just imagine what happens when the lights go out in Bahrain.